Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening to Scroll of Fire, Hearts of Gold by Sherdil Shiv Shankar. Chapter 1: The City That Listens. Delhi can be deafening, not just from the noise, the rickshaws, the buses wheezing like asthmatic giants, the street vendors barking chai prices, but from the way the city soaks up stories and keeps them silent. But I, Sherdil, had learned how to listen to the silences in Delhi. At 41, I was not new to starting over, but this city, its chaos and calm, had begun to feel like a second skin. It was on an unusually quiet morning at Lodi Gardens that I first met Dr. Nandini Rathore. I had arrived early, taking a break from my day job as a freelance architect. I needed to clear my head, to gather my thoughts in the tranquility of the gardens before I got back to the grind of drafting blueprints for some corporate building. The air was still, and the fragrance of blooming flowers hung in the air, but there was something else that made that moment extraordinary. The feeling that I wasn't the only one who'd found a corner of peace in the chaos of the city. She was sitting on one of the stone benches, reading a medical journal, her long black hair tied neatly in a ponytail, her face partially hidden by the glossy pages of her journal. There was a quiet grace in the way she sat, an elegance that instantly intrigued me. I don't know why I approached her. Maybe it was the familiar loneliness I had felt myself in the city, the way we both seemed to soak solace in the same place. Maybe it was her presence, a calming energy that felt rare and precious in the hustle of Delhi. Or maybe it was just a momentary spark, something inexplicable. Mind if I sit? I asked, voice more tentative than I intended. She looked up, and for a brief moment her eyes met mine with a calm that left me momentarily stunned. I had grown used to being judged on appearance, on the way I looked, or the way I carried myself. But in her gaze, I felt none of that. It was as if I wasn't just a passing stranger. I, I, I was present. Not at all, she said, with a soft smile. It's a beautiful morning, isn't it? I nodded, finding it difficult to look away from her face, which radiated the same calm serenity as the garden around us. She set the journal down, and we exchanged pleasantries, quickly realizing we shared a mutual love for nature and a tendency to seek out places where one could breathe amidst the noise of life. What began as a simple conversation quickly turned into a connection that felt effortless, as though we had known each other much longer than just a few minutes. As we spoke, I learned that Dr. Nandini Rathore was a 29-year-old cardiologist, new to Delhi, having recently relocated from Jaipur to work in one of the city's top hospitals. Her presence in Delhi, too, was about finding something beyond her work, beyond the promises of a clinical career. She had arrived with ambition, but somewhere along the way, she had begun searching for peace. For the next weeks, we met often, sometimes by coincidence, sometimes by design. I found myself looking forward to those moments, finding solace in her presence. We wandered through the quiet lanes of the city, sat on benches in parks, and spoke about everything and nothing. It wasn't long before I realized she had become someone important to me, and she felt the same. Chapter 2: The Proposal. It wasn't dramatic. There were no grand gestures, no orchestrated speeches. In fact, the proposal felt as natural as anything else we had shared. One evening, as we walked hand in hand through the lanes of Old Delhi, with the bustling streets slowly turning quiet under the golden glow of streetlights, I turned to her. Her face, lit by the soft light of the street lamps, looked ethereal, a soft breeze carrying strands of her hair across her face. It felt as though time had slowed, the world around us disappearing as I looked into her eyes. I don't want to imagine a future without you, I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. Nandini stopped walking, her fingers tightening around mine. There was a pause, a silence that hung between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. I've been thinking the same thing, she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. Marry me, Nandini. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything I had been feeling. Her eyes widened slightly, and then she smiled. One of those smiles that felt like everything in the world had fallen into place. Yes, Sherdil, she said, her voice full of warmth. Yes. Chapter 3. The Dying Sadhu. It had been a stormy afternoon in Delhi when I first met the old Sadhu. The kind of rain that soaks into your bones, where the sky feels like it's about to swallow the earth whole. I had stepped out of my apartment, barely noticing the heavy clouds gathering overhead, the rhythm of raindrops falling like the ticking of some great clock. I was lost in thought, my mind whirring with plans for the wedding. Nandini and I had already set a date, the excitement of our future together filling the air between us. But then I saw him. He was seated beneath a flickering street lamp in an alley near the corner of my building. At first, he looked like another beggar, someone caught in the storm, but there was something about him that felt different. He was draped in tattered saffron robes, his long white beard falling in waves like a cascade of aged snow. His skin, though wrinkled and weathered, had an unnatural grayish hue, as if time itself had hollowed him out. He sat with his legs crossed in the lotus position, eyes half closed, his face marked with deep silent sorrow. For a moment I hesitated. There was something ominous about the way he sat, the stillness that seemed to absorb everything around him. But as I stood there, something shifted in the air, something that felt urgent. The Sadhu's eyes snapped open, and the world around me seemed to halt. His gaze pierced through the heavy downpour, locking onto me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Come closer, Sherdil," he rasped, his voice raw like the scraping of stones against each other. His words were soft, but they carried a weight that felt foreign to the mundane sounds of the city. It was as though the entire world had fallen silent, save for the rain that pattered against the pavement. I was startled. How did he know my name? But there was something about his voice, ancient and filled with depth, that drew me in despite myself. I approached him slowly, feeling a sense of inevitability, like the winds of destiny were guiding me forward. As I neared him, the Sadhu reached into the folds of his robe and pulled out an old yellowing scroll, bound with a thick leather strap. The scroll looked ancient, its surface cracked with age, its edges frayed like the corners of forgotten history. "Take this," the Sadhu whispered, his voice barely above the sound of the storm. "It will guide you, Sherdil, to a treasure hidden far from here, in the mountains, far from Delhi, in a place where the earth and the sky meet. But heed this warning, only the pure of heart may find it. Others will be consumed by it. The treasure will change your life, but it will demand a price." I reached for the scroll without thinking, as if the fact of touching it had been written into my fate long before this moment. As soon as my fingers grazed the parchment, a sharp, cold shiver ran down my spine, and the air seemed to thicken. The city around us felt distant, as if it were no longer the chaotic Delhi I know, but a strange, suspended place where time itself had become unmoored. The Sadhu looked at me with his deep ancient eyes, and for a moment I thought I saw something flicker there, something both wise and sorrowful. "Go," he said, as if the words were being pulled from his very soul. "Do not wait. Your journey has already begun." Before I could ask another question, before I could make sense of what was happening, the old Sadhu stood with startling speed. As if the years that had hunched his body had melted away in that moment, he turned and vanished into the shadows, his figure dissolving into the torrential rain like a wisp of smoke. I stood there, the scroll heavy in my hands, The storm around me now an afterthought. The air had changed. It felt thick, like I was standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. Chapter 4. The treasure hunt begins. I didn't tell Nandini right away. I wasn't sure what to make of the encounter. The strange weight of the scroll in my hands, the cryptic warning of the Sadhu, but as the days passed, I felt an irresistible pull to the mystery that had been thrust upon me. Something inside me, something that had always been restless, began to stir. A part of me wanted to dismiss it. It could have been some delusion, some trick of the mind, brought on by the heat and exhaustion of a long day. But another part of me, the part that had always been curious about the unexplained, felt drawn to it, to the promise of something more. I unrolled the scroll one evening in our apartment. The parchment smelled old, like the musty air of forgotten temples, and the script was written in an archaic style, unfamiliar to my eyes. The symbols seemed to shift as I read them, like a living language I had to decode. The map on the scroll led to Haridwar. Haridwar, the sacred city on the banks of the Ganges, a place where pilgrims bathe in the holy waters and seek blessings. But this was no ordinary pilgrimage. The map pointed to a location far from the city, in the dense, uncharted forests of the Himalayas. A place steeped in legend, where the line between the earthly and the divine was said to blur. I knew then that this journey would not just be a physical one, it would be a spiritual test, a challenge that would reveal something deep about my own soul. And I was not alone. Nandini, who had always been curious about the mystical, agreed to join me, even though we both knew the road ahead would not be easy. We packed our bags, prepared ourselves for what lay ahead, and set off to Haridwar. The journey was long and exhausting, but there was something thrilling in the air. I could feel the pull of the unknown, the tension in the air as we ventured deeper into the foothills of the Himalayas. Each mile felt like a step forward into something ancient, something powerful. Chapter 5. Haridwar, the River of Souls. Arriving in Haridwar was like stepping into a dream. The air was thick with the scent of incense and burning offerings, the chants of devotees rising and falling like the gentle waves of the Ganges. The river flowed with a quiet power, its waters seeming to carry centuries of history and devotion in its current. We made our way to the banks, where the city's heartbeat seemed to echo in every stone and prayer. The Ganges flowed serenely beside us, but the moment we reached the Ghats, something shifted. The peacefulness of the scene began to feel deceptive. It wasn't long before we encountered our first Aghori, an imposing figure with a gaunt face, eyes dark and hollow, sitting cross-legged on the steps leading down to the river. His body was smeared with ash, his hair matted and wild. He looked at us, his eyes piercing through us like a man who had seen the world's deepest horrors. "You seek something?" he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "But are you prepared to pay the price?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and as we stood there, the reality of the journey ahead began to feel less like an adventure and more like a test of everything we believed. Chapter 6. The Aghori's Warning. The Aghori sitting by the river had a presence that seemed to defy the very laws of nature. His eyes were black as coal, and his body, smeared with the ash of cremated bodies, appeared as if it had been sculpted by the very elements, weathered, ancient, and untouchable. The air around him was thick with a strange energy, like the atmosphere of a temple forgotten by time, and despite the serene beauty of Haridwar, there was something unsettling in the way the Aghori stared at us. "You seek the treasure, but do you understand its price?" he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. The sound of the flowing Ganges seemed distant now, as if even the river respected the gravity of his words. Nandini and I exchanged a glance. The word prize hung between us, thick with an invisible warning. I took a step closer, my curiosity outweighing the unease I felt in the pit of my stomach. "What do you mean by prize?" I asked, my voice steady but laced with a growing tension. The Aghori did not respond immediately. Instead, he reached for a clay bowl beside him, filled with what looked like a mixture of dark herbs, and placed it in front of us. His hands trembled slightly as he did so, but his gaze remained unwavering. "Every treasure has its price," he finally said. "You will find the treasure in the mountains, but beware. The path you walk is one where many have lost their way. The treasure is not gold nor silver. It's not what you think. It's something far more dangerous." I could feel the weight of his words settling into my bones, a coldness creeping over me. And then, with a sudden movement, the Aghori reached up and touched the side of my face, his fingers cold, like the touch of death itself. "Follow the map, but remember," he said softly, his eyes never leaving mine, "some things are meant to remain hidden. Some treasures are cursed." The words reverberated in my mind long after he had turned away, his body sinking deeper into the shadows of the gods. We stood there in silence, the air thick with the sense of foreboding, unsure of what to make of this cryptic warning. "We should keep going," Nandini said, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the concern hidden beneath it. She knew as well as I that there was something more to this journey than we had originally thought. Chapter 7: The Climbing Path. The next morning, we began our journey toward the mountains. Our hearts were heavy with the weight of the Aghori words, but we pressed on, determined to find whatever awaited us at the end of the trail. Haridwar's busy ghats faded behind us as we ventured deeper into the dense forest at the base of the Himalayas. The air grew cooler, the scent of the Ganges slowly replaced by the earthly fragrance of moss and pine. The world around us began to change, becoming wilder, more untamed with every step we took. The trek was challenging. We hiked up steep inclines, navigating through thick underbush, and at times we had to cross narrow bridges made of bamboo that swayed precariously over fast-moving streams. The map from the scroll led us deeper into the wilderness, the path increasingly difficult to decipher. Every now and then I would pause to consult the scroll, its ancient markings growing even more puzzling the longer we stared at them. But despite the struggle, there was something exhilarating about the journey. Nandini and I spoke little, but the silence between us was never uncomfortable. There was an unspoken understanding in the way we moved together, a rhythm that had developed over the time we'd spent together in Delhi. We were more than partners on this journey. We were two souls bound by a shared destiny, and that bond felt stronger than ever. After several days of travel, we reached a remote clearing, the terrain leveling out as we stood at the edge of a vast forest. At the far end of the clearing was a temple, a small abandoned structure, its stone walls covered in thick vines. It was exactly as the map had described, and my pulse quickened. This was the spot. "We've arrived," I said, my voice filled with a strange sense of triumph. Nandini stood next to me, her gaze fixed on the temple. "What do you think lies inside?" I shook my head. "I don't know, but the scroll, it's telling us this is the place." We made our way toward the temple cautiously, the air around us growing heavier as we approached. The doors of the temple were ajar, and as we stepped inside, we were greeted by an overwhelming darkness. It took a moment for our eyes to adjust, but once they did, we could make out the faint outlines of what appeared to be ancient statues, covered in dust and cobwebs. In the center of the temple was an altar, its surface worn smooth by centuries of worship. And on that altar, something glimmered, a small golden box, covered in intricate carvings that seemed to pulse with an eerie light. Nandini stepped forward, her eyes wide with awe. "It's beautiful," she whispered. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. There was something about that box, something I couldn't quite explain, that filled me with both wonder and dread. I reached out to it, but as my fingers brushed against the box, a sudden gust of wind swept through the temple and the door slapped shut behind us. We were plunged into darkness, the air heavy with an unsettling stillness. A voice echoed through the temple, low, guttural, and ancient. "You have come for the treasure, but do you understand the price?" I spun around, my heart racing. The voice was coming from all around us, vibrating through the very walls of the temple. And then, from the shadows, figures emerged, shrouded in cloaks, their faces obscured by hoods. A group of Aghori had appeared from the darkness, their eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. The figure in the front stepped forward. His features were hidden, but his presence was unmistakable. He was the leader, the one who would speak for them. "We are the guardians of the treasure," the Aghori leader said, his voice both soothing and menacing. "And you, Sherdil, have come to claim what's not yours." Chapter 8. The Test of the Soul. The atmosphere in the temple grew dense, like the air itself was trying to suffocate us. The Aghori stood around us in a circle, their eyes glowing with an intensity that made my skin crawl. There was no escape now, no turning back. "You seek the treasure," the Aghori leader said again, "but before you take it, you must prove yourself worthy. The treasure is not a simple trinket, it's a test of the soul." I looked at Nandini, her face pale, but there was no fear in her eyes. Instead, there was a fire, a determination to see this through, to understand the mystery we had uncovered. The Aghori leader raised a hand, and with a single motion, the air around us seemed to shift. The walls of the temple dissolved, replaced by a vast, desolate landscape. We were standing in an open field, the wind howling around us. In the distance, I could see a figure, a shadowy outline moving toward us. "This the first trial," the Aghori said, his voice now distant, as if it were coming from far away. "You must face your deepest fear. Only when you have overcome it will the treasure reveal itself." The shadow in the distance grew closer, and I knew instinctively that this was no ordinary trial. This was a test of our very hearts. The desolate landscape stretched out before us, a vast empty plain where the wind howled like a wild animal in the night. The sky above was a dark, swirling mass of clouds, crackling with unseen energy, and the ground beneath our feet was cracked and dry, like the earth itself had forgotten how to sustain life. It was a world that had felt alien, stripped of everything familiar and comforting. The shadow in the distance was growing closer, its outline becoming sharper. I could feel my heart pounding, a growing sense of dread crawling up my spine. The Aghori leader's voice echoed in my mind. "You must face your deepest fear." But what did that mean? I glanced at Nandini. Her face was set with determination, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, a vulnerability that I hadn't noticed before. It was strange to see her look so unsure, so human. "We'll face this together," I said, quietly, trying to offer her some comfort, though I was uncertain myself. She nodded, but the tension between us was palpable. I could feel it in the air, thick as the fog that had begun to rise from the cracked earth, swirling at our feet. The shadow was now mere yards away, and I could make out the form of a man, tall, cloaked in darkness, with a hood that obscured his face. But there was something about his presence that felt wrong, something that tugged at the edges of my mind, making me question what was real. Nandini stepped forward, and I instinctively moved to stay close to her, though I knew there was nothing I could do if this trial had more power than we could comprehend. As the figure came into full view, I froze. It was me. The figure before us, cloaked and mysterious, was a dark reflection of myself. He was wearing the same clothes I had on, the same posture, the same build, but there was something grotesque about him. His face was pale, almost lifeless, and his eyes, dark and hollow, stared back at me with an emptiness that felt familiar and terrifying. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my attempts to remain calm. "What is this?" The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached up and removed his hood, revealing a face, my face, twisted in a way I had never seen before. His skin was cracked and peeling, his eyes sunken, and his mouth curled into a grotesque grin. "I am you," he said, his voice eerily similar to my own, but laced with a mocking tone. "I am your past, your regrets, your fears." The wind howled louder, almost drowning out his words, but they cut through me like a sharp blade. My fears? I thought, trying to steady myself. "Your deepest fear," the figure continued, his smile widening, "is that you are not enough, that no matter how much you achieve, no matter how much you try to change, you will always be stuck in the same cycle, lonely, lost, and unworthy of love." My chest tightened, the words stabbing through me with the brutal honesty I had been avoiding for years, the doubts I had kept buried deep inside, the fear that no matter how hard I tried, I would never be able to truly escape my past, came rushing to the surface. The shadow of myself stepped closer, his presence suffocating, and I felt an overwhelming urge to run, to escape from the reflection of my own inner darkness. But I couldn't move. I was trapped, caught in the grip of my own fear. "This is just a manifestation of your weakness, Sherdil," the figure taunted. "You'll never be good enough for her. You'll never be able to truly love her, and you know it." His words hit like a punch to the gut, and I felt a deep, nauseating despair flood through me. The worst part was, part of me believed it. Part of me had always believed that I was destined to fall short, that my past, with all its mistakes and brokenness, would never let me truly be happy. I looked at Nandini, desperate to find some anchor in the storm, but she too was staring at the shadow, her face pale, her body rigid with fear. The shadow of me turned his attention to her, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Do you really think she'll stay with you?" he asked, his voice dripping with venom. "She's too good for you. She deserves better than someone like you." I could see the doubt flicker in Nandini's eyes, and for a moment I thought I might lose her. The fear of failing her, of being the kind of man who could never live up to her love, gripped my heart. My chest tightened, and I could feel myself on the verge of breaking. But then something shifted. Nandini stepped forward, her hand reaching out to me, and her voice rang out clear and strong, cutting through the fear that clouded my thoughts. "Sherdil," she said, her voice unwavering, "you are not defined by your past. You are not the man this shadow is trying to make you believe you are. You are more than your mistakes. You are more than your doubts." Her words were a lifeline, a beacon in the storm that had engulfed me. I turned to her, my breath coming in wretched gaps, and saw the determination in her eyes. She was right. I wasn't the man standing before me. I wasn't the person my fears told me I was. The shadow of me sneered, but I stood tall, facing him head on. I had spent too many years hiding from my own darkness, letting it dictate my word, but not anymore. "You're right," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "I'm not perfect. I have my flaws, my fears, and my past. But that doesn't define me. I choose who I want to be." The shadow recoiled, its grin faltering as if it could feel the strength in my words. Nandini's hand was still outstretched, and I took it firmly in mine. "Together," I whispered, squeezing her hand. "We're in this together." The shadow hissed, its form beginning to disintegrate as if my newfound strength was too much for it to withstand. Slowly, piece by piece, it crumbled away, fading into the dark winds that surrounded us. As the figure dissolved, the world around us began to shift. The desolate plain was replaced by the familiar warmth of the temple, the harsh wind replaced by the soft, sacred atmosphere of the ancient place. The air felt lighter now, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. We stood there in silence, the reality of the trial settling over us. I could feel the echoes of my fear still lingering, but they no longer held power over me. I had faced the darkness within myself and emerged stronger for it. Nandini smiled at me, her eyes full of pride. "You did it," she whispered. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "We did it." And then, as if on cue, the Aghori leader appeared before us again, his face unreadable. "You have passed the first trial," he said, his voice filled with an eerie calm. "But there are more tests to come. You must prove that you can endure what lies ahead. The path is not easy, and the treasure will reveal itself only to those who are truly worthy." As his words hung in the air, I knew the journey was far from over, but in that moment I felt a sense of clarity. Whatever came next, I was ready. Chapter 10. The Trial of the Heart. The air in the temple had cleared, but the atmosphere still felt heavy, like a storm waiting to break. The Aghori leader's presence seemed to deepen the silence, and his words echoed in my mind. "You have passed the first trial, but there are more to come." The ground beneath our feet seemed to hum with an energy that was both ancient and powerful. The walls of the temple, once shrouded in darkness, now pulsed with faint light, as though the very stone was alive. The temperature had dropped significantly, and an eerie chill crept up my spine. I looked at Nandini. Her expression was serene. Though her eyes were full of concern, it was as if she understood the weight of the journey we had embarked upon. The journey to uncover a treasure that no one had spoken of for centuries. And yet, it felt as though the treasure we sought was not simply gold or jewels, but something far more elusive. "What do you think the next trial will be?" I asked her, my voice low. Nandini hesitated, her brow furrowing as she glanced around. "I don't know," she replied softly, "but I feel like we're being watched. This place, it feels like it's alive. It's testing us." Before I could respond, the Aghori leader stepped forward, his eyes looking into mine. There was a deep sadness in his gaze, as though he had seen so many souls wander down the path we had chosen. "You have passed the first trial, but now you must face the trial of the heart. This trial will test the love that binds you." I frowned. "The trial of the heart? What do you mean?" He remained silent for a moment, and then he spoke again. "You will be shown visions of what you love, what you fear losing. You must endure them. If your hearts are true, you will emerge from this trial unscathed. If you falter, if doubt creeps in, you will fail." I turned to Nandini, her face pale but resolute. "We've come this far. We can't turn back now." She nodded, her grip on my hand tightening. "I'm with you. Whatever happens, we face it together." With that, the Aghori leader raised his hand, and the world around us began to shift. The temple walls seemed to dissolve, replaced by a soft golden light that enveloped us. The ground beneath our feet trembled, and the air grew thick with the scents of jasmine and sandalwood. I felt an overwhelming sensation of warmth, too much warmth, as if the sun itself were rising around us. But there was something unfamiliar about the heat. It wasn't natural. I tried to speak, but no words came out, and then, as if in answer to my thoughts, the air rippled in front of us, and the vision began. Vision 1, the shadow of loss. The world around us darkened, and suddenly I found myself standing alone on the banks of the Ganges. The river was no longer calm. It churned with the dark energy, waves crashing against the shore with a deafening roar. I felt a coldness creeping into my chest, a feeling of isolation I couldn't explain. And then I saw her, Nandini. She was standing by the river, looking out over the water, her back to me. "Nandini," I called out, but she didn't respond. I tried to move towards her, but my legs felt as though they were weighed down by change. With every step, I was pulled further away from her, as if the universe itself were conspiring to keep us apart. I reached out my hand, but the distance between us only grew. Her figure became smaller, fading into the mist, and I felt a deep, agonizing sense of loss wash over me. A loss of something that hadn't even happened yet, but which felt like a wound that would never heal. The river began to rise, waves crashing higher and higher until they threatened to swallow everything. I screamed her name, but the sound was swallowed by the roar of the water. The vision grew darker, and I felt myself sinking into the abyss, my chest tightening, as though I were drowning in a sea of helplessness. Just as I thought I would be consumed by the darkness, a light flickered in the distance. Nandini! She was reaching for me, her hand outstretched. The warmth of her touch reached me, pulling me back from the edge. I took her hand, and the vision shattered like glass, the world around us returning to the temple, the golden light flickering once more. My heart was racing, and I could feel the heat of tears pricking at the corner of my eyes. Nandini looked at me, her face full of concern, but also a deep understanding. Sherdil, are you okay? I nodded, trying to steady my breath. I, I swallowed hard. I saw you, lost to me. I thought I lost you forever. She stepped closer, her hand gently resting on my arm. You won't lose me, I promise. We're in this together. The warmth of her touch steadied me, but I could still feel the weight of the vision pressing down on me. I couldn't shake the feeling of loss that had gripped me so tightly, even though I knew it was just a vision. Vision 2. The fear of inadequacy. The world shifted again, the golden light dimming as the air around us turned cold. I found myself standing in the heart of an enormous empty hall. The walls were lined with mirrors, and as I looked into them, I saw reflections of myself. But they were all different, each one more successful, more confident, more accomplished than I could ever imagine myself to be. I walked forward, and the reflection began to speak to me, their voices filled with condemnation. You're not enough, one reflection sneered. Look at all these accomplishments. You've barely scratched the surface. You'll never be as successful as them. Another reflection stepped forward. You'll always be second best, always chasing after something you'll never achieve. My chest tightened. The words stung, but there was something familiar about them. I had heard these voices in my head for years. Doubts, insecurities, fears that I would never be enough. I turned to find Nandini, hoping to find some comfort, but she was nowhere to be found. In the mirror, I saw her standing with the other versions of me, those better versions of myself. She was laughing, her eyes alight with admiration for the man in the mirror. A sense of deep inadequacy washed over me. I wasn't enough for her. I was always falling short, always chasing something just out of reach. I sank to my knees, unable to tear my gaze away from the mirrors, the words of the reflections drowning me in their cruelty. But then I heard Nandini's voice. Sherdil. I looked up to see her standing before me, her face soft with compassion. You are enough. You've always been. She knelt beside me, her hand on mine, and the mirrors shattered one by one, each piece falling to the floor like dust. The weight of the doubt lifted from my shoulders, and I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in years. Together we had faced the vision of inadequacy and overcome it. Chapter 11. The Trial of the Mind. The golden light faded away as quickly as it had appeared, leaving us standing in the same ancient temple. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating even, as though the very air around us was holding its breath. We had passed the trial of the heart, but something told me that the worst was yet to come. The Aghori leader stood before us, his expression unreadable, as if he had been waiting for this moment for centuries. He raised his hand once again, his voice solemn. You have faced the trial of the heart, but now you must face the trial of the mind, he intoned. This trial will test your very thoughts, your beliefs, and the truths you hold about yourself. You must overcome the illusions of your own mind. Only then will the path to the treasure become clear. I exchanged a quick glance with Nandini. Her eyes were filled with a quiet resolve, but I could see the flicker of doubt there too, just beneath the surface. We had already faced our fears, confronted the loss we most feared, and dealt with the insecurities that had haunted us for years. But now we were being asked to face something far more insidious, our own minds. Before I could speak, the world around us began to shift once more. The ground beneath us feet trembled, and the air grew thick with an unsettling hum. In an instant, we were no longer in the temple. The space had transformed into a surreal landscape, like a twisted reflection of reality.
Chapter 12,
The
Trial of the Soul.
bleeding into one
The ground
another.
beneath us
The
began
sky
to tremble
dark,
again.
swirling
But this
with
time,
ominous
the
clouds,
sensation was
and
different.
the ground was covered
It was
in
as though
thick
the
mist
very
that
earth
seemed to
itself
move
was
and
awakening,
drift like living
stretching
creatures.
and groaning under the weight
I
of
took a
something
deep breath.
ancient. The
Trying
air
to steady
around
my
us
racing
seemed
heart.
to crackle with an
What is
energy
this
so
place?
powerful that
I
it was
muttered
impossible to
under my
ignore.
breath, feeling the weight
It
of
was
an
as though the
unseen presence
temple,
all
the
around
land we
us.
stood upon, was not simply a place,
This is
but
the
a
trial
living
of your
being,
mind,
one
came
that
the
had
Aghori
witnessed
leader's
countless
voice,
souls
though he was
passing
no
through
longer
its
visible.
trials. The Aghori
Here,
leader appeared
you
before
will
us
see
again,
things
his
that are
face
not
shadowed
real,
with an
but they will
expression
feel
that
all too
conveyed
real.
both sadness
You must
and
distinguish
approval.
truth
His
from
eyes,
illusion.
however,
Veil
glimmered with something
and the dark
darker
will
now,
close to you
something
forever.
that spoke of the finality
mist
of
swirled
this
around
moment.
us, thickening, and I suddenly
trial
felt
of
a
the soul is
sensation
the
of
last
being
and
watched,
most
watched
difficult
by
of the
something
three.
far
He
greater,
intoned,
far
his
more
voice
powerful
deep,
than I could
reverberating
comprehend.
through
The hairs
the
on the
temple
back of
walls.
my neck
This
stood on
trial
end.
will not test
Then
your
it
mind
began.
of your heart, but your very
Illusion
soul.
one,
It will
the
push
ghost
you
of
to
regret.
confront your true essence.
The first illusion
deepest
hit me
parts
like
of
a
you
wave
that
crashing
are hidden
against the
even
shore.
from your
The
own
mist
eyes.
around us
It will
parted,
ask you
and
to
suddenly I
sacrifice
found myself
something
back in my
precious
childhood
in order
home.
to move forward.
Small, cramped, and filled with the
I could
smell
feel
of old
Nandini's
wood
hand
and dust.
tighten around mine.
I hadn't
Her
seen this
warmth
place
was a
in
comfort,
years.
but there was also a
It had been
palpable
abandoned
sense
for
of
so
foreboding
long,
in the air.
left
The
behind
Aghori's
when I
words
left
hung
to Delhi
between
to
us,
build a
heavy
new
with meaning,
life.
a
But now
sacrifice.
it was
could
as
we
real as I
possibly have
ever
left to
remembered it.
give?
I
We
could
had
hear the
already
faint
faced our
sound of my
deepest
mother's
fears,
voice from
our
the other
regrets,
room,
our
soft
doubt.
and soothing,
What
calling me
more
in for
could we
dinner.
give?
But as I stepped into
I'm
the
not
living
ready for
room,
this, I
everything
whispered.
froze.
But
The air
Nandini
became thick with a
squeezed my hand
suffocating
tighter,
tension. The
reassuring
room was
me without
dark,
words.
shadows looming over the
You've
walls as I
already
saw
come
my
this
younger
far,
self
she
sitting
said,
on the floor.
quietly, her
A
eyes
little
locked
boy,
onto
no
mine.
older than 10,
We're in
staring
this
at the
together,
wall in
Sherdil.
front of
Whatever
him.
happens, we
And then I
face
saw
it
my
together.
father standing
Aghori
there in the
leader's voice
doorway.
broke through
A
my
scowl
thoughts.
etched
The
across
trial
his face.
begins
His
now.
eyes burned with anger.
With a wave
He
of his
always
hand,
did
the world
this.
around us
Always
shifted
pushed
once
me
again,
harder,
the
expecting
mist
more
began
from
to
me.
swirl and
Never
form into shape.
satisfied with anything
But this
I did.
time, there was no
You're not
surreal
good enough,
landscape.
Sherdil, he
Instead,
said
the
in a
world
low,
around us
cold
dissolved
voice
into
that sent a
darkness,
shiver down my
absolute
spine.
darkness.
You'll
I
never
could no
amount
longer
to
feel the
anything.
ground beneath
You're
my
a
feet,
failure.
and I reached out.
I wanted
trying
to
to
speak
find
to protest,
Nandini, but I
to tell
couldn't
him
even
that he
see
was
my
wrong.
own hand.
But no words came. I felt the weight of the old regret.
My voice
the years
echoed
of
in the
trying
void,
to live
but
up
there
to
was no
expectations
response.
that had
The
never been my
silence
own.
was
The
there was
years of
deafening.
feeling like I wasn't
For
good
a long
enough.
moment,
It
I
was all
felt
flooding back.
as if I would
Prove
floating
me
in a
wrong.
vast
My
empty
father
abyss,
spat, before
completely
disappearing
alone.
into the mist,
My heart began
leaving
to
me with
race.
that same
a panic
crushing
surged
weight
through
of
me.
failure
What was
that I
happening?
had carried
Where
for
was
so
Nandini?
many years.
And then the darkness
I tried
split.
to move,
A light appeared
to
in the
escape this
distance,
vision.
faint at first,
But my
growing
feet felt
brighter
like they were
as it
glued
pulled
to
me
the
toward
ground.
it.
I
The
could
light
hear
was
my
warm,
younger self
almost
sobbing
comforting,
softly.
but there was something
that
wrong
quiet
about
cry
it,
of a
something
child who had been
unsettling.
taught to
It was
suppress his
as
pain.
though
The
it was
feeling of
drawing me
inadequacy,
into something
of being
deeper,
forever
something
trapped under
darker.
the shadow
I
of
stepped
someone
forward.
else's
The
dream
ground beneath
consumed
me suddenly
and
solid
then
again.
a hand
But the air
gently
was
touched
thick
my
and
shoulder.
oppressive, like I was
turned,
walking
and
through
there
a
was
heavy
Nandini
fog. And
standing
then
beside
I saw
me.
her.
She looked at me
Nandini
with
was
an
standing in
expression
front
of
of me, but she was
understanding.
different.
Her eyes
Her face
filled
was
with
pale.
compassion.
Her eyes hollow
You are
with
not
an
him,
emptiness
she
I'd
whispered,
never seen
her
before.
voice cutting
She
through
seemed
the
to be
suffocating
trapped in some
darkness.
kind of
You are
cage,
not that
a
little
golden
boy.
barrier
You've already
that shimmered with
proven
a
you are
strange,
enough.
eerie light.
Nandini! Nandini,
words
I
were like a
cried,
beacon of
rushing
light
forward,
cutting
but
through the
something
shadows.
stopped me.
I
An
closed my
invisible
eyes,
force
took
that
a
held
deep
me
breath,
back, and when I
she
opened
didn't
them
respond.
again,
She
the house
simply
was
stared
gone.
at
The
me,
mist
her
faded,
expression
and the
vacant and
landscape
distant,
shifted
as if she
once
had no
more.
idea
The
who I
vision had
was.
broken.
You're too too
the
late.
feeling of regret
A
lingered
voice
in
echoed
the
from
air,
the shadow.
as if
It was a
were-
voice
as
that
if
was
it
both
would
familiar
forever
and
haunt me.
foreign. A voice I couldn't quite place.
Illusion,
You
too,
cannot save
the
her,
mirror
Sherdil.
of self-doubt.
You can never save her.
The world
This is
around
your
me
fate,
shifted again,
just
and
as
suddenly
it is hers.
I found myself in a dark, empty
The
room.
voice was
The only
suffocating,
source of
filled with
light
the coldness
was a
that
tall
sent
mirror
shivers
standing
down
in
my
the center.
spine.
Its surface
It was as
smooth
though
and
I was
reflective
speaking
like
directly
water.
to my
I
deepest
approached
fears.
it,
The fear
my
that I would
footsteps
fail,
echoing
the
eerily
fear
in
that
the
I was never
silence.
enough,
As I
the
stood
fear
in
that no
front of the
matter how
mirror,
hard I
my
tried,
reflection
I would
stared
lose
back
her.
at
at me. I reached out again, desperately trying to break through the barrier, but I couldn't. The light flickered, I was looking at myself from a distant grew more and more distant. I could barely expression colder and more hollow. The force that held me back intensified, like an invisible weight pressing on my chest.
The reflection smiled, but it wasn't
I whispered,
my
my voice trembling.
It was cruel,
Nandini,
mocking,
don't leave me.
Twisted.
But the voice in the shadows continued, its tone growing more sinister with every word. You cannot change fate. This is your trial. You must choose the part of you that believes you are destined to sacrifice her, and the treasure will be yours. But if you choose her, you will remain here forever. That's afraid of being lost. I recoiled, the words striking me like a blow. In my throat. My heart ached with the weight of the decision were a mirror to the darkness I had hidden deep inside. How could I sacrifice Nandini, the woman I love, the woman who had been my strength throughout every trial? The fear that no matter what I did, my past would always haunt me, always hold me back. I turned to find Nandini.
You will never be enough for her.
Her face full of compassion, her eyes soft.
You will never be enough for anyone. Not really.
I won't let you,
will
face
always
this
be
alone,
a shadow
Sherdil,
of someone better.
Her voice calm but unwavering.
We are in this together.
But just as I felt I was about to collapse, I heard Nandini's voice took my hand, pulling me into an
look at
embrace
me.
that felt like home.
I turned to see her standing at the edge of the room,
bathed sacrifice the ethereal glow. She was smiling, her eyes full of warmth. It wasn't
you are not the reflection or even a life. You are not the darkness of fear. You are the man who loves, who has the strength to face his fears.
You are the man who is worthy of love, of happiness, of everything.
To the voice that had
with those words, the reflection shattered into 1,000 pieces, each shard vanishing into the air.
My voice steady and
the darkness lifted.
I choose love.
And the world
I choose to
face
normal.
this trial with
Nandini,
landscape
not alone.
Again,
our love is not
the
weakness,
it is our strength. The darkness began to dissipate. The cage had surrounded Nandini vanished, and she was once again by my side, her hand in mine, her warmth filling me with a sense of peace. The world around us shifted once again, the golden light returning, brighter and warmer than before. We were no longer in the abyss. We were back in the temple, standing before the Aghori leader, who was now smiling, a look of pride on his face. You have passed the final trial, he said, his voice filled with quiet reverence. Your love has transcended all barriers. The treasure you seek is not a thing, it is the bond you share. Together, you will find your way to the heart of your destiny. I turned to Nandini, my heart swelling with emotion. She smiled at me, her eyes full of love. And I knew without a doubt that this was only the beginning of our journey together. Chapter 13, The Unveiling. The temple seemed to hum with a new energy. Its once shadowed walls now bathed in a warm golden light. The air felt lighter, as though a great weight had been lifted. We had passed the trial of the soul, and with that the path before us had finally cleared. The Aghori leader, standing at the center of the room, nodded approvingly. His piercing eyes, once filled with inscrutable knowledge, now gleamed with quiet satisfaction. You have done what few ever could, he said, his voice softer than before, almost gentle. You have faced your darkest fears, your deepest regrets, and you have chosen love over everything else. The treasure you seek is not a material one. It lies within you, in the bond you share, but there is still much to uncover. I glanced at Nandini, feeling a surge of gratitude and admiration for her. We had made this far together, and now the final piece of the puzzle was falling into place. The treasure wasn't just some ancient artifact. It was the very journey we had taken, the trials we had endured, the bond we had forged in the fire of those trials. The Aghori leader extended his hand, and in his palm, a small, intricately carved object appeared. It looked like a piece of old parchment, but the edges were golden, and the symbols etched into it seemed to shimmer in the light. This scroll, the Aghori leader said, is the key to understanding the treasure. But the treasure is not what you might think. The path you have walked has already brought you closer to it than you know. I took the scroll from his hand, and as soon as my fingers brushed against it, a strange warmth filled my chest. It was as though the very energy of the temple, of the land, had seeped into my soul. I could feel the pulse of the scroll in my hand, a rhythm, like the beat of a heart that matched the rhythm of my own. What is this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What does it mean? The Aghori leader smiled cryptically. It's a map, but not one of land. It's a map of the heart. Follow it and it will guide you. I looked down at the scroll, and as the Aghori spoke, the symbols began to shift and change, revealing something new, an image. A vision of a mountain raged, jagged and ancient, with rivers that wound like veins through the land. At the center of the map, a single point glowed with an ethereal light, and beneath it, the words began to form. The heart of the Ganga, where life and death intertwine. The treasure lies wherever the river flows but never touches the shore. I stared at the words, my mind racing. The Ganga, it was a sacred river, the heart of India itself. But what did the words mean? And what was this place where life and death intertwined? Nandini stepped closer, her gaze fixed on the map in my hands. The Ganga, Haridwar, she whispered, almost to herself. I looked up at her, my heart skipping a beat. Haridwar? You think the treasure is there? She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with determination. The Ganga flows through Haridwar. It's a place of deep spiritual significance. I think we need to go there. The final piece of the puzzle is waiting for us. The Aghori leader's voice broke through my thoughts. Yes, the Ganga. But you must understand, Sherdil, that this is not a simple journey. The place you seek is not easily found. The Ganga may be the heart of India, but it also holds the heart of many ancient secrets. Many have tried to uncover its mysteries, and many have failed. I felt a chill run down my spine. The trials had tested us in ways we never could have anticipated. But this, Haridwar, was a place steeped in both spiritual power and danger. It wasn't a place that could be taken lightly. We're ready, I said, my voice steady, despite the uncertainty gnawing at the edges of my mind. Nandini squeezed my hand. We'll face whatever comes. Together, Sherdil. The Aghori leader nodded once, and his expression softened. Very well, but remember, the treasure you seek will only reveal itself to those who are truly worthy. The journey to Haridwar will be difficult, but you have the strength to succeed. Trust in yourselves. With that, the Aghori leader turned and began to walk towards the temple's exit. We followed him, stepping out into the light of the rising sun. The world beyond the temple was bathed in a soft golden glow, the air fresh and cool, carrying the scent of incense and flowers from the temple gardens. But the path ahead was clear now. Haridwar awaited us. The journey to Haridwar. The journey from the temple to Haridwar was long, winding and filled with uncertainty. As we traveled, the landscape around us began to change. The modern bustling city of Delhi faded away behind us, replaced by lush green fields, small villages, and winding rivers. The further we traveled, the more peaceful the surroundings became, almost as if we were moving deeper into a sacred realm, far removed from the noise of the world. We spent several days traveling, and each night, as we camped under the stars, we would talk about what lay ahead. Nandini's mind was sharp, and she could sense something we couldn't quite grasp. I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, but there was something else too, a deep, unwavering faith that the treasure was real and that we were meant to find it. One night, as we sat by the fire, I turned to her. What do you think it will be? I asked, my voice low. This treasure, I mean, we face so much already. What if it's not what we expect? Nandini smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. I think the treasure is more than just an object. It's a journey we've taken together, the lessons we've learned, the love we've discovered in ourselves and in each other. It's not about finding gold or jewels. It's about finding the truth of who we are. Her words filled me with a sense of calm. Perhaps she was right. Maybe the treasure we were seeking was already inside us. Perhaps we had already found it, piece by piece, along the way. But as we continued our journey toward Haridwar, the air grew heavier. The mist began to roll in from the riverbanks, and the mountains loomed on the horizon like silent sentinels, watching us as we approached. There was no turning back now. Haridwar awaited us, and with it the final answers we sought. Chapter 14. The River's Secret. The sun had barely risen as we crossed the last stretch of land before Haridwar. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of the Ganga, mixed with incense and the earthy aroma of the surrounding forests, seemed to pulse in the air. The river itself was a vast, flowing expanse stretching as far as the eye could see, its waters glistening like liquid silver in the morning light. It was a sight that filled me with awe, its ancient power and spiritual significance palpable in every wave. We had come to the heart of it all, the place where life and death intertwined, as the scroll had so cryptically described. Haridwar was more than just a city, it was a spiritual portal, a crossroads between the mortal world and the divine. The steps leading down to the river, the ghats, were lined with pilgrims, some praying, others washing away their sins, and still others meditating in silent devotion. Nandini and I stood at the edge of the ghats, looking down at the river, the cool mist rising from its surface. The treasure, the map, the trials, they all pointed here, to this sacred river, and yet something felt incomplete. There was a gnawing feeling in my chest, a quiet voice telling me that the answer lay somewhere deeper, somewhere beyond what we could see. Do you feel it? Nandini whispered, her voice barely audible over the murmurs of the crowd. Her gaze was fixed on the river, her expression contemplative. I nodded. I do. It's like the river is calling to us, as though it holds the answers we need. But it's not just about the river, is it? No, she replied softly, her hand brushing against mine. The river is a part of it, but the treasure we're seeking, it's not something we can touch. It's something we must understand. I turned to look at her, the intensity of her words sinking in. I had been so focused on the tangible, the idea of finding something physical, a hidden artifact perhaps, that I hadn't considered the deeper meaning of the trials we had faced. Each trial, each step we had been an unraveling of something much greater than the hunt itself. It was about us, our love, and our journey together. We need to go further, Nandini said, her eyes narrowing as she looked across the river. There's something more on the other side, something we need to find. I followed her gaze, where the river bent sharply around the corner. The mist seemed to thicken in that direction, and the mountain range that rose in the distance formed a jagged silhouette against the brightening sky. We could sense it now, the presence of something ancient, something that lay hidden in the folds of time. Without speaking, we made our way toward the narrow boat docked near the edge of the river. The boatman, an elderly man with a weathered face, looked up as we approached, his dark eyes glimmering with an understanding that was unsettling. You seek the heart of the Ganga? He asked in a low, raspy voice. There was no surprise in his words, only a deep knowing. We do, I said, the weight of my words settling over me. We need to cross the river. He nodded slowly. The river does not give itself easily. It will show you what you are meant to see. But the journey is not just of distance. It is of the soul. You will face what you must face, and then, only then, will you find what you seek. We didn't question him. We climbed into the boat, the small boat, the old man pushing off from the shore with quiet strength. The boat glided silently across the river, the stillness of the water only broken by the soft ripple of our passage. The mist thickened as we ventured deeper, and the world around us began to blur, the line between reality and illusion fading. The sounds of the ghats, voices, prayers, the ringing of temple bells dissipated into the distance, leaving only the hum of the river. As we crossed, the air grew colder, the mist wrapping itself around us like a heavy cloak. I could feel something shifting and an unseen presence guiding us. My mind raced as I tried to decipher what we were truly seeking. The treasure wasn't a thing, it couldn't be. The trials had led us here, but this journey was not just about us. It was about the river, the heart of India, the pulse of life itself. And then suddenly, the boat came to a halt. We were in the middle of the river, far from either shore, and yet it felt as though we had arrived at the very center of the world. The air was still, and for a moment the mist cleared, revealing a small hidden island in the distance. The island was lush and green, its tree thick with foliage. There was no sign of life, no people, no animals, just a tranquil silence. The boatman looked at us. You must go there. That is where your journey ends. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the final piece, the treasure. The Island of Secrets. The boat docked on the Smile Island and we stepped out onto the soft sandy shore. The moment our feet touched the ground, the air around us seemed to shift. There was a deep sense of peace here, but also an undeniable power, a feeling that we were standing on sacred ground. The trees surrounding us whispered in the wind, their leaves rustling like the soft murmur of ancient voices. We walked deeper into the island, our footsteps muffled by the thick foliage beneath our feet. The island was dense, its trees and vines thick and tangled, as though it had remained untouched by time. The path before us was narrow, barely visible beneath the undergrowth. And then, ahead of us, we saw it. A large stone altar, weathered by centuries of wind and rain, stood at the center of a clearing. Atop the altar was a single object, a small, intricately carved box, no larger than a small chest. It was covered in ancient symbols, some of which were familiar, while others seemed alien, foreign in their design. I stepped forward, my heart racing. This was it, the treasure we had sought. But as I reached out to touch it, the ground beneath us began to tremble. The air grew thick with energy, and the altar seemed to shimmer, as if reacting to our presence. A deep resonating hum filled the air, like the beating of an ancient heart. The symbols on the box began to glow, and I could feel the power radiating from it. I glanced at Nandini. Her face was filled with wonder and apprehension. It's not just a box, she whispered. It's the key to everything we've learned. I nodded, understanding now that the treasure was not about possession. It was about knowledge, about awakening to the deeper truths of life, of love, of self. This was the final revelation. The box was a symbol of everything we had uncovered, our shared journey, the wisdom we had gained through trials, and the love that bound us. As I reached out to touch the box, the hum of energy grew louder, filling the space around us. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for the final moment. Chapter 15. The Tiger's Path. The air grew heavier as we stepped closer to the stone altar, the box atop it pulsing with an ancient energy that seemed to resonate through the very earth beneath us. The mist, thick with an ethereal glow, swirled around us, blurring the world outside the clearing. All we could see was the altar, the carved box, and the ominous energy that seemed to vibrate from it. But just as I reached out to touch the box, something changed. A deep rumbling growl echoed through the clearing, low at first, but building with intensity. The sound was so primal, so raw, that it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I froze, my hand hovering just above the box. Nandini too stopped, her eyes scanning the shadows of the forest beyond the clearing. And then we saw it, emerging from the trees at the edge of the clearing, its massive form moving with fluid grace. A wild tiger stepped into the open. Its eyes glowed with an intensity that matched the energy of the altar itself, an eerie, almost otherworldly yellow that shone in the mist. The tiger's coat, striped with dark gold and black, seemed to shimmer in the fading light, its body massive and powerful, each movement exuding an aura of untamed strength. The air around us seemed to freeze, the mist thickening with the presence of the beast. The tiger didn't growl again, but its stare was piercing, unblinking. It was as if it had been waiting for us all along, its presence an inevitable part of the journey we had come so far to complete. Nandini stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tension. It's not attacking us, she murmured, though there was a note of uncertainty in her tone. It's watching us. I nodded, my heart pounding. It was clear the tiger was not here to harm us, but there was something about it, something ancient and mystical, that seemed to hold the key to the next step of the journey. The tiger's gaze shifted, first locking onto Nandini, then slowly moving to me. I felt as if the very air around us was thick with expectation. The tiger was not just a wild creature, it was a guardian, a being from a different realm, one that stood between us and our destiny. The weight of that realization pressed down on me, and for a moment I wondered if we had been wrong all along. Could we truly unlock the treasure, the knowledge we sought, without understanding the deeper forces at play? Before I could say anything, the tiger moved closer, its massive paws silent against the earth. It stopped only a few feet away from us, its eyes never leaving ours. The mist around it seemed to dissipate slightly, as if the tiger itself was parting the veil that had clouded the clearing. Nandini took a deep breath, her voice a whisper. I think it wants us to follow it. My heart skipped a beat. Follow it? But why? The tiger wasn't just a wild animal, it was a force of nature, a creature that lived in the heart of the wild, untouched by human hands. Its role here, in this sacred place, felt symbolic. The tiger shifted again, its body flowing like liquid, and then, in a smooth motion, it turned and began to walk toward the dense forest surrounding the clearing. The path it took was narrow, winding, and barely visible under the thick underbrush. There was no doubt in my mind that it wanted us to follow. Should we go? Nandini asked, uncertainty creeping into her voice. It could be dangerous. We don't know what's out there. I looked at her, feeling the weight of the decision settling in my chest. But I knew, deep down, that this was the final trial. The tiger wasn't just a creature of the forest, it was part of this journey. Somehow, it held the key to the last part of the treasure we sought. We have to, I said, determination lining my words. Whatever comes, we face it. Together. Nandini nodded, her grip on my hand tightening. Without another word, we followed the tiger into the depths of the forest. The wild path. The deeper we ventured into the forest, the more alive it seemed. The trees, thick and ancient, loomed overhead like silent sentinels, their branches twisting in the air, creating a canopy that blocked out the sun. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and wet leaves. The ground soft beneath our feet as we navigated the path, which was now barely distinguishable from the undergrowth. The only sound was the rhythmic padding on the tiger's paws on the forest floor and the occasional rustle of leaves. Despite the thick mist and the dense forest, the tiger seemed to know exactly where it was going. It moved with a purpose, its every step deliberate, and though we couldn't see the way ahead, we trusted it. The presence of the tiger felt like a guide, leading us toward something we couldn't yet comprehend. After what felt like an eternity, the forest began to open up, and we found ourselves standing at the edge of a small hidden clearing. At the center of the clearing stood a massive tree, its trunk twisted and gnarled, the roots sprawling across the ground like the veins of some ancient creature. The tree seemed to radiate a quiet power, its branches reaching out to the sky as if it had witnessed the passage of countless generations. At the base of the tree, half covered in the moss and vines, was another altar, a stone platform, just like the one on the island, and atop it, gleaming in the faint light of the clearing, was a single object, a shimmering stone, no larger than a fist, glowing with an ethereal light. The tiger stopped at the edge of the clearing, its eyes now fixed on the stone. It sat down silently, as if waiting for us to approach. "This is it," Nandini whispered, awe filling her voice. "The final piece, the treasure." I stepped forward, my heart racing. The stone seemed to hum with a familiar energy, the same kind that had pulsed through the scroll and the box. As I reached out to touch it, a surge of warmth filled my chest, and the world around us seemed to blur. The air hummed, and I felt the weight of centuries of history pressing down on me. And then, as if the stone had unlocked a hidden door, I understood. The treasure was not just the stone, nor the altar, nor the trials we had faced. It was the journey itself, the growth, the love, the sacrifices we had made along the way. It was the unity we had forged, the wisdom we had gained through the trials. The tiger, a creature of the wild, had led us here, not a physical prize, but to an understanding that transcended everything we had sought. The tiger stood, its eyes still locked onto the glowing stone. It was as though it had fulfilled its role, guiding us to this moment, and now its purpose was complete. It let out a soft, almost reverent growl, and then, with a final glance toward us, it turned and disappeared into the depths of the forest. The revelation. As the tiger vanished into the mist, I felt the final piece click into place. The treasure was not an object, it was a transformation, an awakening of the soul. It was the realization that our journey, our love, and our shared purpose had brought us to this very moment, this moment of clarity where the true meaning of our trials was revealed. I turned to Nandini, and for the first time I felt the weight of everything we had experienced settle into peace. We had come through the trials together, and in doing so, we had unlocked something greater than we could ever imagine. The stone at the base of the tree began to glow brighter, and in its light I saw the path ahead, clear and full of promise. The treasure was not something we could possess. It was something we had become. Together, I said, smiling at Nandini. We found it. Her smile mirrored mine. Yes, Sherdil, together. And with that, hand in hand, we walked into the future, no longer searching for a treasure, but living the adventure we had already created.
The end. Thank you everybody for listening to my book Scroll of Fire, Hearts of Gold. It was a pleasure for me writing this story and even more for sharing this story. Thank you guys. Namaste.